Big Red has a smell to him. Boy, he's a monster. Easily 10 foot. We might have shot one. My name is Dale. I live in north central Arkansas. I had my first encounter back in 1973, but it was at a time when there was no such thing, and we never heard of Boggy Creek, nothing, none of that. So none of us ever talked about it. And then I live up here on a mountain now, and a bunch of my friends had a bunch of AK-47s and ARs and SKSs and stuff like that, and they didn't have any place to shoot. So I said, "Come on out to my mountain." I said, "We'll put up some targets up there on the mountain, and we'll shoot the heck out of them." So anyway, that's when it started. Anyway, we shot for maybe 2 hours, and didn't think anything about it. Next morning, uh, I noticed the trees all around the perimeter of my house on the mountain was just torn up, shoved down, or bark tore off of them, or limbs broke out. It was a mess. And I'm, what in the world? And one of the trees actually had like these four big old gashes across it. And I was it's like, what in the world could do that? I still wasn't putting anything together. And I found I had some things going on that I contacted a local Bigfoot hunting groups, actually Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel. And I contacted them and I said, "Would you guys come up here and check my place out?" I said, "I think I got something going on." Well, I went on their first adventure with me. I went on my first adventure anyway, on my own property with them. And I was hooked ever since. And that's why I got into it. I've been following them around all over the state now, going here and there. So anyway, that's it.
So this all happened in 1973,
Huh?
and that happened in 1973. This incident where you were shooting.
No, that was just about 7.5 years ago.
So tell me about that first encounter in 1973.
Oh, it was I lived in a little old small town not far from where I live now, as a crow flies, maybe 30 miles. And it's a little small town, probably a population of 100, maybe, if it's lucky. Um, and there, all the boys there, of course, we were all kind of similar in age, a couple of years separating all of us. I was one of the oldest ones. And we did everything together. We hauled hay, we swam, we rode dirt bikes, we did everything. And so the one particular day, we was having this game we played on our dirt bikes, going to follow the leader. And what you had to do, you had to try to follow that first guy. Every place he went, you had to do it too. And it got kind of hairy every once in a while. Well, that day I was in the lead, and so I rode my bike, and I said, "Man, I'm going to take my bike straight up that mountain." And I went up what we called White Rock Mountain. I don't know if it's actually got a name, but out in that parcel of land, it was like a huge pie shaped area of land between two highways, and there wasn't a road, a house, nothing, not even a field. It just had a few fences here and there, down on the bottoms. But up there on that mountain, and I was just driving. Boy, I went over some tough stuff. Went through a river. I mean, I did it all. I got up on top of this mountain. I drove out there, and there's an old town up there, and it was the freakiest thing I've ever seen. There was even an old wooden boardwalk in the front, and there was an old saloon door with a false front, the saloon, and had one old swinging door still hanging on the hinges. I'm thinking, this is just too cool. So I turned my bike off, and here in a little bit, all the rest of the guys caught up with me, and they went, "Wow, what's this?" So we got up there and we got to poking around, and we found one old cabin that was pretty much intact up there. It was a little ways away from town, a couple hundred yards away from the old town. And so we got to thinking. We all hunted and fished and everything together, and every one of us was like, "Man, this is our new deer camp." Because nobody ever hunted up in there. It was back in the middle of nowhere, and lots of wild hogs and everything back in there. So we we all decided, well, let's just fix this place up. So we spent a couple weeks hauling boards and everything else with our dirt bikes, hauling concrete, everything else up there, and we rebuilt the old fireplace. We boarded up the windows. We fixed it all up so we could actually have a fire in the fireplace. We put pegs on the wall for all of our rifles and shotguns and everything. And so that was like a month before deer season opened. So we all waited and waited and waited. None of us had been up there, and the night before deer season, I can tell you exactly the time when I had my experience. That's something that a lot of people can't do, but it was November the 14th, 1973, at 12:33 a.m. I looked at my watch. I said, "What the heck is going on?" But anyway, we all got our stuff loaded up that first day, and we rode all of our stuff up there. And by the time we got up there, it was about an hour before dark. So we spent our time, gathering wood and everything for the fireplace. We said, "Man, this is going to be too cool." So we had all of our wood inside, and everybody all got in, got all of our sleeping bags around the floor in front of the fireplace. Everybody was playing cards and just having a good old time, talking about the hunt in the morning. None of us had ever hunted up there, and up there that far back, we had all hunted it, but none of us had ever been that far back. And anyway, everybody had fallen asleep. There was those two of us, me and the next oldest boy that was there. His name was Big Steve, and we were talking about the hunt the next morning and then where we could position everybody so we get the best shot and all that stuff. Keep shooting each other, and it was getting along about midnight there. And he says, "I think I'm going to turn in." So I said, "Yeah, I'm right behind you. I'm just going to throw a little wood on the fireplace." And I had just started hearing, I was, how flames do in the fireplace. I was just sitting there, just kind of spacing out, watching the flames. And Steve, I heard him start to snore over in his sleeping bag. And I said, "Well, I guess it's time for me to turn in too." I turned around and started to go out over to my sleeping bag. And I mean, it was like all hell broke loose outside. Uh, and there was stuff hitting the roof. There was the walls were shaking. And I was like, "What in the world?" Steve was instantly awake again. He goes, "What's going on?" I said, "Dude, I don't know." We both of us grabbed our guns and the big spotlight we had there, and we pulled open the door, and both of us kind of started to jump out there on this little front porch that was on that building, and we were completely surrounded. I mean, by these great big red eyes all the way around as far as you could see both directions with that flashlight. And boy, we jumped back in the house, slammed the door. She said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "I have no idea. I don't even know what this is. This is crazy." I mean, it was big eyes. I mean, there must have been, I know from that one side, we must have saw 50 of them. I mean, it was crazy. It was like, you know, Bigfoot Mecca or something, but we didn't know what to call them. We didn't know what it was. So we get back inside. Steve said, "What are we going to do?" But I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to stand guard at the door. You get everybody awake and get their stuff packed and get everything, bedrolls all rolled up and everything." And I said, "We got all the bikes parked right there beside this porch." I said, "One of us will get out there, and while the rest of us, stand guard with our weapons, and one of us will get out there and start every one of those dirt bikes." And I said, when I tell you go, I said, "Me and Steve, we'll stand on the porch up here. Everybody else get on their bikes and we'll yell, 'Go!' Everybody take off." Well, we did that. It was like, boom, everybody takes off. Steve and I just opened up out there in the woods. We shot anything that looked like it was moving. And we shot and shot and shot until we ran out of bullets. And both of us jumped on our dirt bikes. Away we went. And, we never went back. Never. Never talked about it. Never went back. Never thought a thing about it after that until this started happening around here again. And I was like, "Uh-oh, yep, I bet I know what that is." And then I found out about Bigfoot and, the creature, Boggy Creek and all them stuff. And that's basically where I am today.
Well, it sounds like a pretty traumatic experience. Do you stay in touch with those same guys that went with you up there, the younger men?
I think as far as I know, there's only three of us still alive. Um, one of the guys, I saw him about, oh gosh, about 14 years ago. And he said, "You remember that time?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "You ever talk about it?" And I said, "No." And anyway, we talked for about an hour about it. He said, "Man, that's the craziest thing ever happened to me." And I said, "Yeah, me too." but he at the time he said he didn't know where any of the rest of the guys were either. But as far as I know, none of them ever talked about it except me and Steve together. And right now, I'm talking to you about it.
So you never told anyone in 1973 when you came
Oh no,
back, you didn't share that with your family or friends or
oh
anything like that.
no, no way.
How do you think they would have
As a
responded?
crow, yeah, as the crow flies, see from that location, we were up on what they call Turpin Mountain, and it ran all the way around on dirt roads and then cut down into that other location where we was at. But uh, as a crow flies, that was probably 4 miles from my dad's house, maybe a little bit more than that. But see, he started having stuff. Something was tearing the walls off his barn and getting his cow feed, the sorghum grain, and all that stuff. And he just like must be a bear, and he kept boarding it up. He's put uh, electric fence wire around there and everything, and it just whatever it was just walking right through the electric fence and tearing the boards off his barn, eating all his cow feed. And one night the dogs got. It wasn't too long after that. The dogs went just crazy one night. I had a couple of big old mixed mutts, big old strong country dogs, and they all took out. Boy, boom! Way they went out there across the pasture. Well, Dad grabs his gun and he goes out there, and something had run through a five strand barbed wire fence and just snapped every one of them, and just kept right on going. And he said, "Man, I don't know what that was. It must have been pretty big." He followed. He went out in the pasture with the dogs, and they got to a certain point, and they all turned around whimpering and ran past him the other direction. He said, "Man, that's all I wanted." So he came back to the house, and so I think probably he was having the same problems. I wouldn't say for sure, but just what I didn't tell him anything about what we'd experienced up on the mountain because I knew my dad. He'd say I was imagining things or I was crazy or something. So anyway,
So that all happened after you had been on the mountain and saw the red lights.
yes,
Yeah. How
absolutely.
long did that how
It
long
was
did
about
that go on?
it was about 2 or 3 weeks after that, actually, and that started happening at my dad's house. So I don't know if they followed me home because I went straight home when I left that mountain. I don't know, but anyway, we all kind of spread out, went towards my dad's house, and then he started having trouble like that. I figured something probably followed us to see where we went, So I don't know.
Do you have you ever done any research on that old ghost town?
You know what? I talked to the oldest fella around at that time, and he was 93 years old, and it was Mr. Warren, and he said that his grandfather told him about a town that used to be up there when his dad was a little boy. So I knew that it had been over 100 years since anyone had ever even been in that area. I mean, it was desolate. There was nothing up there. And I went back. I got me a really good metal detector and my gun, and I was going to go back up there and just find that old town and just metal detect out there and see what I could find. And I knew there was some danger up there, so I was armed, ready for that. I got up there, and that place had turned into a housing addition. There's houses all around this cute little neighborhood, and I said, I bet they don't even know that old town is down over the side of that mountain. But anyway, that's as far as it went. I tried. I said, boy, uh, that I sure messed up stuff up. I was really wanting to get back up there and see what I could find later, but impossible. Had
Yeah.
signs everywhere, no trespassing and all that stuff. So
So that led you to eventually get in touch with the Arkansas cartel, and they came to your property. And tell me again what was going on your property that they came
well,
over there.
I had all those trees and stuff getting torn up. Um, and it was I didn't know what it was. And I got out there and I started having all my chickens disappear, and I had a wall on the chicken coop was pulled off. I mean, it was something really powerful had gotten a hold of it and pulled it off because it had to bend the whole wall to get it out under the eaves of the building. and that's how it got the wall down. And I thought, boy, that took some power to do that, you know. But I was just having just like I had big rocks. I had a deck on the back of my house, and I had a bunch of big rocks and tree trunks and stuff thrown on my deck and just destroyed it. Uh, I started having trouble with when I was out mowing. My whole yard would be covered with rocks, so I'd have to spend an hour picking up all the big rocks so I could mow my lawn. And you had to watch for incoming. I mean, you had to keep your head on a swivel. And I had a boat that kept getting thrown across the yard and down over the bank, and all kind of things like that. I called Wendell, and they met me, and I told them all about what was going on. And he said, "Yeah, we'll come up there." And anyway, so we they all showed up, and I said, "Man, I'm going with you on this. I got to find out for myself." We got up and we found uh, lots of big old tracks. We found one of them that even looked like a big old gorilla track or something. That was like the big toe or the thumb or what. I don't know if it was a handprint or not, but the thumb or the big toe or whatever it was all splayed out to the side, you know, instead of lined up with the other toes. And we hadn't found one like that before or since, I don't think. But anyway, we found all kind of stuff. Found little tiny juvenile tracks, and some of the things were like 6 to 8 inches long. And then we found bigger tracks that was like 21 inches long, and just found them all over right up there together. A lot of 13-inch, 12, 13-inch tracks. And we found a tree up there that had it was a hollow tree that had a bunch of plastic bottles and like plastic bags and just little pieces of junk that people throw away that was stashed in that tree. And I mean, I pulled stuff. I sat down there and pulled stuff out of that tree, and I'm like, how in the world all this stuff get in this tree? And they say, man, that's a playground right there. That's the place where they put their toys. So look at all these little tracks, and there was, of course, possum grapevines and stuff hanging down. And I'm like, and I bet you're right. But we even found a ledge right up above that where there was a big butt print in the dirt with a handprint beside it. Looked like Big Mama was sitting up there in the dirt watching the little kids play, just sitting there with a hand over there resting on the side, you know. But we'd found all kinds of things. We even got a one. We put up some game cams and stuff, and we captured some eye shine right around that same area that was oh, I want to say it was right there at the position on that tree where they were shining in back of it. It was about 9 foot, but in order for something to have been standing behind it, the hill was like this. So whatever it was standing down on the back side of it. So we know it had been at least 10 foot to the eyes. And so there's some pretty good size creatures, whatever you want to call them, up there. Uh,
Well, it sounds like it. It sounds like you have had quite a bit of experience. Now, have you actually seen one up there?
yes, I have. The first time I actually we know one of them. We call him Big Red because he's a monster. He's got to be easily 10 foot, and he's got hair just about the color of yours actually. um, anyway, he's very vindictive. It's like, and we kind of thought maybe when we were shooting all those guns, we might have shot one or something because it was almost like payback from him. There was always something. And the first day I saw him for a good long time, I was out planting azalea bushes down on the east end of or the west end of my yard. And I just happened to turn around and glance up the mountain, and there was a great big oak tree. It's probably, 24-inch diameter on the trunk. And he was swaying back and forth behind that tree. And he stood up there and watched us for 30 minutes. And I turned around, what am I doing? I got to go get a camera or something. You know? So I ran to the house to get me a camera. When I took off, he took off. So never saw him again. And then I saw him another time, one night, uh, he was down at the end of my lower driveway or my upper driveway, and he was standing down there behind the trees, and the moonlight was behind him. I was out letting my dog do her business, and she wasn't growling or anything. That's what really surprised me. But he was down there, and he was swaying back and forth. He was just standing down there, and I just hollered at him. I said, "I know you're down there." And he just, and a little bit later, he was gone. And I was like, "Well, I got to get in the house." So I took off, went back to the house. And then another night, oh, Big Red has a smell to him. You always know when he's in the area. He smells like, oh, what I would think water moccasin, rotten potatoes, and skunk mixed together. I mean, he's nasty. And you can always tell he's out there. And whenever he's out there, if I smell him, I always yell, "Hey, I know you're out there. I know you're here," you know. And but one night I always took the big light, my gun. I got so I didn't go anywhere outside without my gun on. And anyway, I shined the lights one night. I was as far north or south on my yard as I could get without getting up into the tree line. And I was I could smell him, and I was like, "Oh no!" So like, I know you're there. So I got looking on the mountain. Sure enough, there's these big guys that was coming straight down the mountain at me, real slow, just advancing. And I watched him for a little bit, and I heard something else, and I swooped around like this, and there was seven other sets of eyes in a semicircle, all coming together towards the center. And I was the center, and I was like, "Uh oh, boy!" I turned around and ran. I think that's like military precision, you know. They knew exactly what they were doing, and it really frightened me. And then I had one night where I was out there and I could smell him, so I had my light, my gun, and when I turned the light on, it was just pure luck, I guess, but the beam hit right on him, and he was standing right on top of a shell pit out there at the end of my property, and he took off running, and I was trying to keep up with him with a flashlight. I couldn't believe how fast he was. He ran out of my flashlight. It was just I couldn't get my hand on him. That's how fast he was. I thought, "Oh, he's crazy." And then I had another uh, episode out there with him. I know it was him, but like I say, I always took my light and my gun, my pistol on my hip and everything whenever I went outside. But that night I had my truck was parked right at the end of my walkway, and I needed something that's in the seat of my truck. So I'll go get it. And I said, I was just right at the end of the walkway, so I'm not going to worry about my pistol or my light or anything because the walkway lights would come on and all that. So I just walked right out there, opened the door of my truck, and the cabin light come on in my truck. The porch lights came on. And have you ever been standing out at the side of a freeway when a semi came by? You
Yeah.
can feel that wall of wind that hits you, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I'm sitting there, and I reach over in my truck without getting in. I just open the door and reach in. I feel this wall of air behind me, and something says, "Whoa!" right in my ear, and it was gone. And that scared me so much. I was like, "Boy, if that wasn't a message that I got you anytime I want you, I don't know what it was." You know, but it was like he was counting coup or something, you know, like the American Indians used to do. That scared me to death because I was like, man, he had me that easy, you know, and I wasn't even ready for him. And and then I had a oh man, it was a that this one bothered me a little bit. I was uh out at that far end of the yard that night. This time I had my German Shepherd was out there using the bathroom, and anyway, he never alerted or anything that anything was going on. I didn't smell Big Red, so I wasn't worried about him. Uh, I'm standing there. I hear something behind me in the shell pit. And I'm standing right there at the opening to the shell pit, and I've got this spotlight that's it's got this ring of LEDs that lights up all around the outside just so you can see to walk and everything, without turning on that big beam. And I had that on, and I kind of swung around toward the shell pit. It was about 6 foot from me. It's these big hairy legs, feet standing right there by me. And, I just kind of raised that light real slow, and it was illuminating this thing's body. And right off, I knew it wasn't Big Red. That's why he had gotten so close to me. I never heard him, but it's definitely a he. And when I started raising that light little by little, I was trying not to move too quickly. And I definitely wasn't going to look into his eyes because, I've seen how silverback gorillas react. When you look into their eyes, they get kind of mad about it. And I think, I sure don't want to make him mad this close because I'm within arm's reach of this thing. He's huge. And he was, it was, I was, the solar plexus right there below your breastbone.
Mhm.
I was looking straight into his solar plexus. That's how big this thing was. And it wasn't red. And this thing was kind of it started with like a dark brown fur all over it. And it kind of struck me at the moment because it looked like it was styled. His hair was wavy and smooth and kind of shiny with that light. And I swear to God, it looked like he had, how women go and get the frosting in their hair in the summertime and everything. At the end of his hair looked like it was frosted, kind of almost to uh, a light brown or a blonde. It was kind of crazy looking, but I started raising this light up slowly, 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 and I got up to where I was seeing about. I didn't want to shine it right in his eyes, but I raised it up so I could start seeing the shadow where his eyes were sunk in. I could kind of see just like a twinkle, his eyes were shining, and I just I had already had my pistol in my hand, and I started raising my pistol. About halfway up his body, I squeezed the handle, and that laser sight came on. And I just raised my wrist until that laser sight stopped right here on his throat. And you could see that light was illuminating the hair. And he kind of looked down like that. And we just stood there for a while. And he was looking at me, and I was just standing just as still as I could. And I didn't know if he understood me or not, but I told him, I said, "You might get me, but I'm going to shoot you in the throat." And we just stood like that for a little bit. And man, right to the west of me, boom, bang. I was like, whoa, I thought I was getting bum rushed from the west. So I just kind of took my eyes off like that for just a second to make sure I wasn't getting hit from the side. And I went right back to him, and he was gone. So whatever it was a distraction so he could get away. And I'm like, boy, that's pretty smart. And but I had another kind of in that same area. Wasn't near as scary, but it got my attention. There was a whole little grove of red buds. I was weed eating one day out there. Wasn't too long after that, and I was weed eating, and that whole grove of redbud trees was shaking. And I'm like, oh boy. So I turned my weed eater off, and I started slowly backing away. And from the west, this tree says, boom, right there where I was standing. So I think they're trying to get my attention so they can smash me with a tree. Wow. And as I jumped back, this rock come flying, and I just ducked it, and it took the bark off the tree behind my head. And I, I I backed away as quick as I can. Once I hit the flat part of my lawn, I turned around, I dropped the weed eater and ran. And I didn't go back outside for about 2 days. And go out there and get my weed eater out of the dirt. But that's about all that's happened right around this general area for me.
Do you go out with the cartel to other places as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been to. I think I've been to just about every outing they've had. The Arkansas Boys, the Arkansas Bigfoot Hunting Club, I believe, is one of them. Uh, Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel, uh, reporting Bigfoot. I go out with several different groups. I'm kind of act as a tracker for those groups when we go out.
So, tell me about some experiences you've had in other areas.
Oh, well, we had some dandies. The very first big camp out that I went on uh, was with Wendell and his crew, Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel, and we went up into this area up along this river in the national forest land, and we got up in there. We drove and drove and drove, and I followed him in because there was no way in the world I could follow those pins to get back in there. It was crazy, and we got back in there, and Wendell and I we were setting up camp. We got the stones around the fire pit and everything, and I had a chainsaw with me, and I cut up a few old dead limbs and everything. We had them sitting around. Well, we started the fire. We actually sat around there long enough that I cooked dinner for Wendell and I over the campfire. And Wendell, he's like, up here, where the rest of these guys are. And I said, yeah, I don't know. And he got a phone call just a little bit later, and he he looked at me. He says, "Man, I got to go. I got to go get the other guys. They can't find this place." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll stay here. I got my dog, my big dog. I'll stand here." I had a big boxer at the time, big female boxer, and she had a nose small for her. She could smell anything. And I said, "I'll just sit here and guard the camp while you're gone." I said, "We'll be all right." So Wendell leaves, and I mean, about 5 minutes after Wendell left, I have never heard the forest go that deafening quiet before. I mean, it was absolutely no sound, no bugs, no birds, and oh man, I think there's an apex predator here somewhere. And my dog, of course, she would run over here and growl, and she'd run over here and growl, and she was running all around me growling. And pretty soon she just came and crawled under my chair. I said, well, that can't be a very good sign. And oh, it took about 20, 30 minutes. Here comes Wendell back. I was never so glad to see anybody in my life because this is the first thing I've ever been on with anybody besides on my own property. And here I am all alone. And I saw these trucks coming down this old path, and I thought, thank goodness we're all sitting around and we're talking, and we've been hearing all kind of whoops and wood knocks and anyway, Wendell said, anything going on while I was gone? I said, absolutely nothing. It got so quiet, it scared me to death. Well, we sat and talked until around midnight. And anyway, I said, well, okay, boys, I was the oldest in the bunch. I'll be 68 next month. And I said, well, boys, I'm turning in. And they all looked at me. They said, you're sleeping in a tent? And I said, yeah. And all of them was like, nobody sleeps in a tent around here. Nobody. I'm like, I'll be fine. I got my big dog. She's going to get in the tent with me. I'll be fine. One of the boys stops me as I'm walking out of the main area right there. I'm about 20 yards from them, right off to the side. You don't get away from kind of the noise and stuff because I knew they'd be talking half the night. And so anyway, I'm starting there. I come by him and he stops me and he says, seriously, nobody sleeps in a tent around here. And I'm like, I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. I got my gun. I got both my guns and I got my dog. I'll be fine. I'll sleep in 10 all the time on these things. And so I go on to sleep and I heard coyotes. I've been really close during the night, all kinds of stuff. It didn't bother my dog, so it didn't bother me. So I just lay my head down and I'm sleeping. And right about 3 a.m., I get woken up and I hear this big crunch, crunch, crunch in the leaves right outside my tent, the back of my tent. And I raised it up and I listened. And I was thinking, well, I must have just been imagining this because, they gave me such a hard time about sleeping in a tent, trying to scare me or whatever. And so I laid my head back down. I think, well, I must have dreamed that or something, or I'm just, might be one of the guys messing with me. I laid my head back down and I dropped right off to sleep. And I mean, it wasn't just a little bit. Bam! Something hits me in the head right through the side of my tent. And I rolled away from it. And I could see the big fingers in the material of my hand trying to grab me through the material. I mean, it was pressing the side of the tent in a good 18 inches or better. And it was reaching, and this hand was just humongous. And I say hand because it had five fingers and it was, guys, about that big around. And it was reaching, trying to get me like that. And so I rolled away from that. Well, about the time that happened, I pulled my pistol at the same time. And there was this real deep guttural growl came from the other side of the tent by the door. Well, my dog is like, we ain't having none of this. She comes over the top of me toward the door, and I spun around, put my sights on the door, and whatever it was, decided they didn't want to deal with a dog and a gun, so they took off. And my dog and I, we sat in that tent for a long time, listening and listening, and I got to thinking, well, maybe that's just them crazy ones up there in the camp just messing with me. Or surely they know I've got weapons in this tent. But I unzipped the tent. I peeked out of the door, and the only thing was in camp that was going on was a fire that was burning down. There wasn't anybody was up. Nobody was moving around. Everybody was in their trucks. And here I am in my tent. Well, I looked down the other way, and I'm like, I can't see any sign of these whatever they was outside my tent. So I zipped that tent down, and me and my dog, we made a run for my vehicle, got in, shut the doors, locked it, and we stayed like that till daylight. And I wouldn't know going back to sleep. Here's some people say that they can go back to sleep after doing that, but not me. I knew something was out there, and it was a lot bigger than I was. And so as soon as it started getting daylight, I unlocked the doors. And me and the dog, we made a run for the campfire, threw a bunch of sticks on it, and got it blazing good because it was still burning. And wasn't too long till the other guys got up. Well, we got to looking around. I was telling them what happened, and right there by the by the fire pit, uh, Wendell had driven his van in there, and right above where he was sleeping in the van was this huge handprint right on the window. And went back down, looked around my tent, right on the back of my car. There was a great big handprint about 5 foot from the door of my tent. So, that was pretty amazing night. It ruined my dog. My dog was scared to death after that. She runs from anything now, and she's big, and but it ruined her and
Can
scared her to
imagine.
death.
I can imagine that would be a pretty frightening experience. I'm going to switch over now and I'm going to just make note on the recording here for my editor that the first half of this is going to stand alone. And now we're going to move into the uncut version of this. And now I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because you have some
Okay.
amazing stories to talk about. So let me just kind of jump into so much of what you've been talking about. First of all, it sounds like you're pretty proficient with hunting and guns and things like that. What kind of guns did you and those boys have up there in top of that mountain in 1973?
Oh, we had a little bit of everything. Everybody was loaded for deer, bear, hog. A lot of 30-06s, 12 gauge shotguns. I mean, so everybody was loaded. I think whatever we shot would have went down. I don't know if anything ever did, but we didn't stop shooting until we shot bullets.
So, how many of you boys were there?
There was I seemed like there was seven, but I can only remember the names of six of them, so I'm not sure.
So,
It
so you're up
might have
there in
just
the
been
cabin.
six, huh?
So you're up there in the cabin, and you did you go outside the cabin when you started shooting, kind of, and see them surrounding you?
No, we just stood right there by the door, and all of us, the guys that took off first, they all unloaded all of their weapons out into the dark. And when they ran out of bullets, they jumped on their bikes and away they went. And as soon as they took off, uh, Big Steve and I unloaded ours into the dark and just shooting just here and there, just try to scare everything off, give those guys a chance to get out of there. And as soon as we ran out of bullets, we jumped on our bikes, away we went.
So, what was there a road or a trail up there? Was it easy to see to get out of there?
Mostly just where we had driven back and forth on our bikes. Uh, there was there was not really much anything except where we had come up the mountain several times when we were working on that cabin. The grass was all pressed down and stuff, and tire tracks, and it wasn't like a road. It's more or less like a little path that we'd ridden over and over again.
And I assumed you had lights on your bike so you could see.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you leave anything up there? Did you desert anything?
No, I guess everybody had their uh, sleeping bags and everything all rolled, and of course most of them had uh, the scabbards on their bikes. They could just shove the rifles and shotguns down in while they rode, and I just had a sling around mine, and I just slung it around my shoulders when I ran out of bullets, and I already had my they had tied my me and Steve, they had tied all of our sleeping stuff on our bikes ahead of time, all of our supplies. I don't know if we left any kind of food up there or not. I'm not sure, but I don't care now. I'm
Of
just
course
glad to get
not.
away from.
So, what time of night was this when you woke up and started shooting?
Huh?
About what time of night was it?
It was there wasn't a whole lot of stars out. We were pretty much couldn't really tell a whole lot about the sky because we were in a pretty densely uh, overgrown place with trees and tree limbs and stuff, and so there was a lot of shadows. But I can't remember seeing a whole lot of moonlight out there at all. I can't really. It seemed like it must have been a pretty overcast night or something.
So you went back, you went straight home from there, all of you,
Mm-hmm.
to your
Mm-hmm.
separate houses. And when you got home, it was still dark, obviously.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, we
Did
rolled in.
anyone
I
did
got into
anyone
my house probably about 1:30 that
so it was about 1:30 in the morning. No one questioned why you guys came on home instead of staying out there hunting?
night. No, my dad mentioned it the next morning. He said, "I thought y'all were going hunting." So we changed our minds. Come back. We'll go hunting around here. But I never did tell him why or anything. It was just too much. Everybody had just agreed. Just we can't tell anybody about this because everybody think we're all nuts.
So this old ghost town that was up there on the mountain, it obviously had been there a long time. If you talk to someone that knew about it from over 100 years ago.
Yeah, I had as close as we came to anything as I did find something up there. I had a little bitty cheap metal detector that I carried with me a lot, and I found it looked almost like a penny just laying out there in the dirt. It was kind of well, I just kind of had to scuff it out of the dirt with my metal detector, but it was from I think it was Bartle and James Meat Packing Company, and that was a meat packing company that used to bring in the big pallets of food for the Union Army or the Confederate Army or one of the armies. I can't remember. Might have been the Union Army, but this is I got to talking, and as close as we could tell. See, the old military road is about oh, I don't know how many miles, but it goes straight across all the way to Little Rock. And the only thing I could ever figure out on that was that someone suggested that it was probably just like a stopover have some fun before you start into battle. One of them kind of towns. Do a little gambling, drinking. Just relax on the way to down the military highway, military road. And so that's the only thing we ever figured out. Never did find a name or any kind of record for it at all. But it was definitely there. It was amazing.
Well, but so that you think that possibly once upon a time there'd been a road kind of through there?
Huh?
Do you
Yeah, I
think?
think there was a road that came from the south off the the road to Little Rock, Arkansas. I think it came north and went out there because it wasn't that far. I think the closest that I could tell that the military highway came from there was about closest was about 15, 20 miles. And I think that was probably, was a really good halfway point from Memphis to Little Rock. And I think that's what it was. It's just a place to relax and let your hair down for a little bit before you started, going into battle.
So you identified several buildings there. You said a saloon, and what else did you notice there?
There was a couple of buildings that was like attached to the. You could tell they had been attached right next to the saloon at one time, but they were basically just an old pile of boards. But the old false front of the saloon was still there. It was just kind of laying back, and you could see the old boardwalk was still in front of it. It was made out of lumber, and there was one old door, and it was that old building that we restored was about 100 yards maybe southeast of that saloon. So that was all that was left of it. My dad told me afterwards. I told him about the old town, of course, but I didn't tell him what we experienced. But he said he had heard that a grass fire, like a small forest fire, had went up the side of that mountain. And he said whatever that was up there, he said I think your all's cabin you had up there is burned to the ground because there's nothing left of it, just the chimney. And he said anything else is up there is nothing but ashes now. So,
So did he know someone who had been up there?
did
Did
he?
he know? Did he know someone had been
Uh,
up there?
well, see, at the time, my dad had retired, and retirement was driving him crazy because he had a bunch of cows, and he growed a little uh, feed for him, for baling. But there was a lot of times in between where there was just nothing to do, and it was just driving him nuts. He had to be doing something all the time. So he got a job driving a county road grader, and he drove all those roads up in that area. That kind of surrounded that. There was all those roads went to a certain point, and then just went north and south, and that whole area west of them, all the way to that highway. There was no roads except for ones that went all around the outside of it, both directions. Well, Dad drove his road grader. Of course, he talked to all the people along the way, chatted, and I guess that's where he found out. As far as I know, he knew a lot of the. There's partial places there called Blackjack Mountain, and Dad knew a lot of the guys that lived up there. He was friends with them, so I guess they probably told him about the fires coming up through there or whatever.
Did he know by then about your Bigfoot experience? And
No, I
did
never told him.
never
Never
told
told him
him?
a word about it. No.
So he didn't even know about that. So he couldn't have asked anyone up there if anyone had seen anything or not. Anyway,
Well, they've there's actually a I guess a group of people that's gotten together because they've had a small conference or something just close to there in a little town called Bologna, uh, and Bologna is just a hop, skip, and a jump from right there. Highway 5 way on the other side of that place, that big section of land goes straight to Bologna. So I think that's pretty much. There's been a few people talk about it, and then there's a little place called Center Hill where they've had a lot of Bigfoot reports. Center Hill is about 16 miles from where I grew up, and so there's a whole bunch of reports that came from around there, and I've actually talked to a few people that have seen them run across their pastures and stuff like that up in that same area.
feel a lot of people hunt up in that area. Do you think?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's a big hunting area. What type of game is all around there?
Mostly just whitetail deer. I don't think there's a whole lot of wild hogs up in there now, but there used to be quite a few up in that one area. But I had never seen any of it, but mostly just whitetail. So, turkey.
And that's what you guys were up there to hunt was the deer
Uh-huh. Yes, ma'am.
mostly. Hmm. Okay, so you look outside and there are all of these red eyes staring back at you. You said there were like maybe 50 red eyes. What was going through your
No,
mind
I'm
when you
thinking
saw this?
50 sets of red eyes. Because see, we could see all the way from like this corner of the house all the way to this corner of the house, and from what we could see with the flashlight, there was it surrounded all the way around us to that point, and we just assumed they were all around us. It's not just that one side. But I don't know how smart they are. That's on the side that the drawer was on. Maybe they knew that, but anyway, there were quite a few of them.
Sounds like it. So what was going through your mind when you saw that? I mean, how old were you, first of all?
I was 17 at the time, and I was the oldest one up there. Uh, I had no idea. I mean, I really had no idea. I had never heard of the Patterson film. I had never heard of. I think Boggy Creek actually came out in '73, didn't it? Legend of Boggy Creek.
I'm not
But
sure.
I didn't see that one. I didn't see that movie even until oh, till I was about 20, 25. Uh, so I didn't have any idea what to call this. I knew that there was some kind of big something that ran a whole group of armed hunters off that mountain, and I don't know what it was, but it was the eyes were way off the ground. So I knew what it was. It wasn't, it couldn't possibly have been wolves or bear. It couldn't have been any of them things because it was way too tall. But it was that ring of eyes they were probably, I would say they were probably 20 yards all the way around us, perimeter from us. And they were just like spaced. There was a bunch of them.
So when
And
you left, how did you, if they were making like a parameter, a circular parameter around you, when you left, how did you get through that?
that's why we fired all of our guns off like that. We said, well, we got to go that way. So everybody was shooting anything that we thought might be there. We shot all around in that area trying to clear that big space out. So hopefully they were smart enough to get out of the way of the gunfire, and that would leave us a way to get out. But that was the only thing we could think of because we knew if we stayed in that old building very much longer, it wasn't going to be standing. If they were, I mean, the whole building was shaking. I don't know what they were doing. If they were throwing rocks, if they were slamming into the side of it, but you could see our guns were swaying on the hooks. I mean, that's how hard this building was being hit. And it reminded me a whole lot about that Ape Canyon incident. I think, man, I know exactly what them guys were going through. uh,
So
excuse me.
basically, when you shot in that area, did the eyes just go away then and allow you a path through?
Yeah, I evidently they just got out of the way of it because I mean we had like I know there was got to have been seven of us out there that night, but we had five guys that just emptied everything they had into that area all the way, you know, just I mean emptied their weapons and took off, and then we started firing kind of to keep them off the other guys. And as soon as we got done, we were standing there by our bikes. We just stepped on them and hit the road right after them as hard as we could go. It was a very scary night. We didn't know what was going on. I don't guess anybody knew it was a Bigfoot. Nobody still don't know. I figure that's probably what it was.
When you talked to those seven, well, you were one of the seven, I guess. When you talked to any of those six other guys after that, did you discuss this? Did you talk about the incident and what did you say?
He said, "You remember that night?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember that night." He said, And he asked me, he said, "Did you ever tell anybody?" I said, "No, I didn't." He goes, "I didn't either." He said, "First time I've ever talked about it since that day, that night." And I said, "Yeah, me too." But that was it. I mean, we never talked to anybody about it because you know how it is. We get calls from people all the time where they say, "Well, we saw something. Could you come out here? Because our family thinks we're crazy." You know, and we'll get that same thing. And it was even worse back then. If we would have come off the mountain, all of us boys, and said we had a whole army of monsters ran us off our hunting site, nobody would have believed that. You know, nobody.
So you grew up not that far from there, and was it on a farm? Was you grew up on a farm?
Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
Well, tell me about your childhood on that farm before Bigfoot showed up. What was life like there?
It was great. I hunted. I wouldn't think anything about being out in the woods 2 hours before daylight in my stand, or staying an hour after daylight in my stand. I never. Only one time I had a bear follow me, and that kind of shook me a little bit. Big bear, uh, but it followed me all the way out in the middle of the pasture to where my car was parked. Uh, but that was the only time I have ever experienced anything up there other than up there at that deer camp. It was I never even thought about it. Never, I was a little bit jumpy every once in a while with noises, but uh it just uh it just never occurred to me after that. It's almost like I just blocked it out of my memory and didn't want to think about that anymore. You know what I mean? Uh it's like now on my land, I don't hunt. I don't hunt up here. I don't think I'll ever go hunting again. Uh just I know what's out there, you know, especially after been going with the research groups, I know something's out there. We've seen it,
Yeah.
we've heard it.
So tell me about this farm that you grew up on. How many acres? Was it mostly wooded? Did it have a creek on it? Was it just
Uh,
pasture land? What did it look like?
uh, the back 80 acres, I think that had close to about 80 acres up there. And the back 40 was, the front 40, toward the south was basically just flat, open land with no trees on it. And the whole back 40 was wooded, heavily wooded. And some of it went down in big ravines. And one of the places where you could go down there in the summertime, it was about 30 degrees colder than the other temperatures, as is one of them type of areas. And I was the only one that hunted it. So it was amazing, deer everywhere.
Do you have brothers and sisters that grew up there with you?
Yeah, but none of them ever hunted. I had an older brother, Clarence, that used to bird hunt every once in a while. My older brother, the oldest brother, he never hunted. And then I had one big sister, Linda, and a smaller sister. Uh, that of course they didn't hunt. They just you know, but it was a nice place, small town, really nice to grow up there. It's really enjoyable.
Did your dad hunt?
No, he used to hunt quite a bit when we moved from Kansas, and up there he only thing I could ever remember him hunt was pheasant.
So you said at one point that from the mountain where you had such a scare from these red eyes, and then you came back to the farm, didn't tell anyone, and then suddenly your dad starts having these issues with something that is tearing down walls and getting into food in the barn. How long a span of time was it between that mountain incident and when your dad started having issues at his place?
It was probably 2 weeks, maybe or less, and those problems went on at the farm. I mean, his barn was getting boards torn off of it, and hay that, or I mean, sorghum feed that was disappearing in these 100-pound grain sacks. He'd have a 100-pound grain sack there, and it would be empty in the morning. They just have them a smorgasbord. but he never connected to anything but bear. That's the only thing he ever said. And
Was there anything around there that indicated it could have been bear? Because were there any tracks or did you look for tracks?
you know, there we actually didn't have a very high population of bear at all. There for a little while, the Game and Fish turned some bears loose to get rid of some of the beavers along the Desert Bayou, or tried to control the population of beavers. But as far as bear, you never heard of anybody even seeing a bear or anything. And Dad just immediately started thinking it was a bear, but I I really doubt that. I really doubt if it was a bear. I had one with a cub about 3 years later, run me out of the woods down. It was south, way south of my dad's house. But as far as a bear coming up there in the yard, especially with those two big old dogs, they would go after anything. But whatever was getting stuff out of the barn, woke up, went out there one morning, no dogs, and we found them out there by the barn, ripped in half, both of them.
Your dogs, the dogs were
Yeah,
ripped in half.
yeah, and they were big old muscled up dogs. I mean, one of them named Duke, he stood up taller than a German Shepherd, and he looked like a British Bulldog every place else. He was just muscled, and he'd jump right in the middle of a coyote back. Didn't bother him a bit. And together, they were a menace. I mean, they would go after anything, and whatever it was, killed them right there by the barn. And I was like, no, that couldn't have been a bear. I don't think bears would have been able to do that with both of them. And both of them they were laying side by side. So, I just don't believe a bear could have handled both of them like that, because both of them were big dogs. One of them was half chow, half German Shepherd. So he was big and had great big long teeth. So but they would just jump right in the middle of a coyote pack and just kill every one of them.
What did your dad think about that? Did he think it was a bear?
He that's all he ever said. He guys, well, I guess that bear got them dogs. And I said, I don't think a bear could kill our dogs, Dad. I really don't. But he never would say anything else. That's what my dad was. That's why I didn't tell him about it, because I knew he'd say, "You're crazy. You guys saw bears or something." So I never told him a word about it, and he never expected uh, anything but a bear. He wouldn't even want to think about it. He's like, "Bear is a bear." You
And that went on for how long there at that farm?
know, not very long after that. After the dogs were killed, Dad put up some high voltage lines out there. I mean, he stopped messing with the fence chargers, and he hooked it up to raw circuit. I mean, you touch the thing, it was going to knock you down. I mean, it was 110 volts, right, just like the house circuit. And after he put that up, he put four strands of a 120-volt line surrounding that barn, and there was nothing got in that barn after that. Fact is, he had a pig that tried to go there, and he said, "I think I killed my pig." I mean, it knocked this great big hog down on the ground. So I think whatever that was, it found out that it couldn't get through those wires because it was going to get hurt, and he never had any more problems with it.
So that stopped the whatever this was coming into the
Yeah,
barn.
whatever
It
was
stopped
trying to
that.
tear his barn up, get his feed, I put an end to that real quick. And I don't know if anything continued. I joined the Navy in '74, and of course I left. I planned on just going to Spain and staying there, but I ended up not doing that. But I don't know if anything went on after that or not. But Dad sold his place shortly after that, and moved into a town about 20 miles south of there. So I don't know if maybe he had seen something that he didn't want to see, and decided he's just going to move him and my mom out of there or what, but he just stayed long.
So how long were you in the Navy?
I was in total 8 years.
When you got out of the Navy, then you went back to Arkansas?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that where,
Hmm?
go ahead.
Yeah, I moved back to Arkansas and I married my high school sweetheart. I went to school up at used to be SCA in Conway, Arkansas, and then it changed to UCA, and we moved back to the hometown where we went to high school. We moved from Conway back to there, and that's where raised all our kids and everything.
So then you bought this property at some point, or you lived on this property anyway, where they show up again.
Yeah, yeah. I had a really good friend that I played golf with. He's an old fellow, and we were sitting there drinking cold beer after golf one day, and he said, Dale, you want to buy my place? And I said, no, I hadn't thought about it. He said, would you give me 10,000 for it? And I said, tomorrow. And I bought it, and I've had this place about 25 years now.
And how far is that from that farm and the mountain?
Um, it's about, as a crow flies, it's about 25 miles, maybe.
Do you think these things were have always been there on that property, or do you think that this also had something to do with them following you home and then tracking you down here on this property?
Well, I don't know about that. I think as far as if I was a Bigfoot and I wanted some place to live, I'm right next to the river. I have a pretty vast cave system on my land on the mountain. Uh, there's a lot of deer. Obviously they could catch fish, but they've got water. They've got caves to stay in. I think they've been here a long time.
So you
In
think
fact,
that it wasn't because you lived there necessarily, they just have always been there,
I
probably.
think maybe they have, and I think just that shooting we did that time, uh, maybe they thought would start marking their territory a little closer or something. I don't know, uh, but I haven't. I don't go up there by myself anymore. Uh, I tell you, I went. I didn't hunt for a long time up there. And one year, I used to be just an avid bow hunter. I was bow hunting all the time, even during gun season. I'd go bow hunting because I just enjoyed it more than shooting a gun because it didn't seem like sport. I just wanted to shoot an arrow. And but I went up there and I wear these amber shades because I have troubles with like greens and browns, certain shades of them. And with those shades, I can differentiate a deer, walking up a lot easier, or whatever else walks up. And I was wearing those shades, and I went to the up above the first layer of cliffs on my mountain because that's where I'd seen a lot of deer sign and everything. And I think, well, I'll just stay up here till it starts to get dark, and then I'll get the heck out of here. And I had those shades on, and I'm sitting there, and I hadn't seen a thing, hadn't even heard a thing. I mean, it was quiet, and I pulled those shades off. And if you've ever been outside, like in the woods or anything else with amber shades on, those shades make it look a lot lighter outside than it actually is. I pulled those shades off, and I was like, oh my God, I'm on my mountain in the dark. I mean, it was just the sun was almost gone, but those shades were just fooling me as about what time it was. And so I took the shades off real quick, put them in my pocket, and I got myself, I was just still hunting on the ground up there. And I started to move down off that mountain pretty quickly. On right directly east of me, I hear this great big on a tree, bam, and I'm like, oh boy. And I think, well, that was definitely a knock. And it was just almost straight across from me. It sounded like on the mountain. And directly after that, right down below that first set of cliffs that I had to go down, there was another knock right below me. And that's always something I've always thought about. These wood knocks. You see these guys on TV, they get out there and beat the bark off of a tree. I think that's not what they use that for. Because I kind of think that that knock way over to the east of me, and that's knock right down below the cliff was like, where is he? I got him right here. Here he is. I think they were watching me the whole time. Probably why I didn't see any deer. Um,
Now, is that
but
where you saw Big Red and where Big Red was hanging out? Is that same property, that 10
yeah,
acres?
that's the same. Yeah, that's the same property. That's why I
Now, do
haven't.
you
That's the only
do you
time I've
live
ever
there?
went hunting up there. After that, I just
Now, do
think
you
no.
live there? Do you live on that property, or is that just a property you own to hunt on?
Yeah, I actually have a house right here down below the tree line, about 30 yards. So the woods kind of surrounds me. I'm sitting up here on the side of the mountain by myself.
So you live there as well as, but when you refer to, you don't go up on the mountain. You just don't go back in that wooded area where the mountain is.
Yeah, I don't know what inspired me to get the nerve to go up there again, but I hadn't hunted the place and like I had been hunting up there in probably 10 years because it was just kind of spooky. And I was like, and then this started with the stuff getting torn up and everything. And then I realized what was up there. And I was like, I'll never go back again. And even armed, I would not go back by myself. There's no way because we
What
pretty
what
much
all happened? What all happened up there that made you think that?
oh we've pretty much determined that there's at least seven adults up there, at least seven. And the big alpha red, I don't know if he stays here a lot or if he just kind of moves from like clan to clan or what he does, or maybe goes other places to hunt, brings it back. I don't know. But that one particular area up there, we call it the nursery because we're pretty sure that there's a clan up there that it's a breeding clan and they're raising young ones up there.
Have
Because
you
I
have
know,
you have you
because I
had
know
any
they're.
incidents with the young ones? Have you had any incidences with the young ones?
Oh no, I don't guess so. Not that I know of. I think they pretty much stay away from us. But we've had some crazy stuff. I had one morning I woke up and my whole deck and my walkway was covered in hair. I've never seen anything like that before. I'm like, what in the world? It was, I mean, covered with hair. The hair was about maybe a half inch thick. My whole deck, my whole walkway out in front of my shop. And it looked like deer hair. I don't know. It's about maybe 3, 4 inches long, but it was just hair. And like,
What did you
what
do
is it?
with it? Did you have it analyzed or anything, or did you keep it?
No, no. I've got hair. I've got hair samples in my backpack, but they're more like souvenirs than they are anything because I mean, you know yourself that that it's not for lack of evidence, or lack of DNA. Uh, I think there's tons of DNA already out there, but until there's a subject that we could compare those samples to, like a deer, or a bear, or a fox, you find a fox hair, you have it analyzed. Well, this is a fox hair with this. There's nothing in the database that says what this is, and so I figure I'll just keep it for a souvenir. We've got quite a few big prints cast, and we have hair samples, and we have some fantastic audio. Uh, it's just you know I just
You
sweep it
you
all up, burn it.
I understand. So you had an idea that there may be seven up there. What gave you the indication there were seven?
Just the different amounts of tracks. I mean, you talk about even if you see a print that's like 13, 14 inches long, it's a pretty big animal. He's probably easily 8 foot. Uh, we know, we know red's easily 10, maybe over. And that one night where I saw, all the eyes coming converging in a circle around me that night. I know I counted seven sets of eyes spaced out about 5-10 yards apart, like in a big circle, all coming straight towards me. And so I know there was at least seven that night, and Wendell and the rest of the crew decided that there seems to be at least seven individuals up there that are uh, young adults or adults, pretty good size animal.
What other incidences have you had on that property with these creatures?
Oh gosh, uh, I probably had some really hair raising. I probably had oh maybe 5 or 6 incidents with them. You know, or I actually knew they was there, or I saw them, or and it's just well, like we were doing a live broadcast in my front yard one night, and there's a show called Praying and Squatching, and we were doing a live broadcast out there, and we had I actually did another expedition up on top of my mountain, and I had run 110-volt line up that mountain, a great big long, I mean, heavy duty wire, so we wouldn't lose any voltage. We ran electricity all the way up on top of my mountain and put up electric motion detector lights, cameras. We put a like a food trap up there that they couldn't resist, bacon, honey, uh, just all kind of goodies, and it smelled really good. I would have ate it myself if I was a squat. But we ran that line all the way down. I had a dedicated line that I made in my shop. That was the only thing on that line. So the power going to those lights didn't have to depend on anything else being on down here. And as we're sitting there, that line came down between my house, come around in front of my shop, and plugged into an outside uh, plug-in out there, and a weatherproof plug-in. And as we were sitting there, the guy that was doing the broadcast said, "What was that? Where are you guys at right now?" We said, "What?" And he goes, "Something just stepped out between the house and the shop and just stopped and just turned around and whoop, back up there." But we figured whatever it was something followed our electric wire all the way down that mountain, and it just come right around the end of the shop without even thinking about somebody being there. And there we were. And I had it on film. This thing came out in back of us, like 10 yards behind us, stopped, crouched down, and went whoop, back into the dark. And that was crazy.